Okay, so it's right at 12. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Polina, and we're teaching this webinar together. Dr. Lola, as you know, is the founder and the incredible developer of the EMC process, and TESSA, which stands for Team Emotional Safety Assessment. I think a lot of you here have done that assessment already. Hi, Jamie. Buenas tardes. It'd be amazing to teach this webinar in Spanish. Spanish. Maybe that's what we need to do, Mom. We need to translate in Spanish. Okay, so as you all know, Dr. Lola is amazing. She's a published author. You probably have her books already. If not, you can find them all on our website. She's also been married for 43 years. Dr. Lola happens to be my amazing mother, and
Thank
she's been
you.
working in this field for 15 years. The developer of the EMC process that's completely changed her life. And my name is Polina. I am lucky enough to be Dr. Lola's daughter, and I am a certified EMC trainer. I also do marketing. I've been in marketing for years, and I've really taken that EMC process and integrated it into my personal life as well as my professional life. And I also do social media. Hi, Kathy. Yes, if you have a few moments, please go ahead and put in the chat your name and where are you from. We love to get to know you and connect with you individually on a personal basis. And you probably get texts from me. So if you haven't gotten text from me, you can also connect with me and you can get into my personal text group on all this kind of information. So I've witnessed the process for the last 10 years with my kids. I've got 5 kids, and it's just been so transformative. And I'm so excited to be here to share this with you guys, and also to help support my mom in sharing her passion and dreams of changing company cultures and
Yeah,
changing
so
the
I
resolution.
yeah, I want to also thank you so much, Palina, for being here, and thank you everyone. I
Yeah.
know how difficult it is to find time to attend a webinar, so I really, really appreciate. It really shows how much you care about your team, your role as a company, your company as a whole, and so about humans being and relationships. So I really, really appreciate. Thank you so much. All
All right,
right.
we're going to get started on what is emotional safety, but why is it important in your life, but specifically in your business or your team or wherever you're working. So, the first thing to understand, this is so, so important. What does it look like when your work environment is not emotionally safe, and what it looks like when your work environment is emotionally safe? Because sometimes we experience our work environment and think everything's fine. Like we don't know that there's actually a problem because we're just so used to that kind of environment. And we don't realize the things that we could be experiencing are actually hindering our optimal ability to thrive in our environment. So these are some signs to look for. And while I'm sharing these with you, just take a moment to think about what your work environment is like and how do you feel, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel in each of these categories? So when your work environment is not emotionally safe, number one, you have disengaged employees. You may be a disengaged employee, or you may have moments in your at work while you're working or after work where you feel disengaged from your colleagues, from your coworkers, from your boss. Number two, inconsistent work attendance. Number three, low productivity. Number four, continuous arguments. And number five, low energy and creativity. And a lot of times you feel probably like sometimes we have these, we hear people say, oh, like I just don't like my job, or it's just so stressful. And oftentimes we associate that with maybe not following what we're actually really passionate about. But in what we do, we see that emotional safety in the workplace is so important that you can actually have a thriving environment and shift that culture and still have people that are actually really excited about being part of that team and being part of that company, even if maybe it's not something that they're really truly passionate about it. And we just recently had this conversation about it because this is the most important aspect of creating a team that is thriving and a company culture that really thrives. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you have access to the chat, give me a number where you feel like your work environment is emotionally safe. 10 being very emotional and safe, that means engaged employees, consistent work attendance, high productivity, connected conversations, high energy and creativity. And then 1 being not emotionally important or not emotionally safe at all, disengaged employees, inconsistent work attendance, low productivity, continuous arguments, low energy and creativity. Okay, so Lewis said 5. Lisa said 3. Hernan said 9. Hernan, amazing. I will just take like 70% credit for that for after our meetings with you. Kathy said 5. Okay. So this is just awareness. So we just pretty much assessed in a very, very, very simple. We're going to get to the detail form of assessing emotional safety as we continue this webinar. This is a simple way to understand where do you feel like your company or your workplace falls, whether it is or it isn't an emotionally safe environment. All right, so just a reminder that we're recording this, so you'll have access to this webinar as we continue through and after, so you can really understand how to create that. Okay, so did you want to share the story, Mom?
Yes, yes, yes. So I'm
Okay.
just going to stop sharing for a little bit and just share this quick story that was related to me recently. And this is an engineering company, and they were working on a product for a client. And the client submitted a change order. So they created the redesign and sent it to the production house, which took about 5 weeks to manufacture. Well, when they got the parts back, they realized that there was a mistake in the design. So this is very common thing that happens at work. We make mistakes, we make a wrong decision. Well, this particular team had this mistake, and the engineering manager, I'll call him Nick, he was shocked. He was completely surprised. It took him off balance. It was like so confusing to him. How is it possible that this mistake could have happened? And especially with people that he has been working for so many years. I mean, the designer Lisa, who was there for 15 years, knows the work very well, but she was so embarrassed and ashamed of that mistake. And Mike, who was the engineer, he had this huge sense of fear suddenly that happened to him. Like, oh my gosh, we have to wait another 5 weeks. What are we going to do? So, as you can imagine, they were all flooded with all these emotions, strong emotions. And the emotional safety really determines what you do with that initial response of happening in yourself. That initial response helps you to either lead your team into connection and safety or disconnection and toxic environment. So this initial response is very, very important to how people respond. So luckily, Nick and Lisa and Mike, they obviously had training in this, and they were able to really slow down and sit together. Nobody dashed out of the room, or nobody gave a remark, and an angry remark. They were together. They sat around the table. They put their hands in their head in their hands, and they were thinking, what's happening? They took breath, they slowed it down. And suddenly Nick said, listen, we have this 3D printer next to us. we can redesign the part and print the part on this 3D printer. Suddenly, they saw an option. Well, this option could not be seen when they were flooded with emotions, because when we get flooded with emotions, we can't see options. We have just like tunnel vision. Oh my God, this is terrible happening. What are we going to do? And nothing is coming our way. So, because they were able to slow it down, to relax a little bit, they were able to see. And by having this option, they all became relieved. They made a quick redesign, they sent it to the printer, and voila, by the evening time, they had a new part. And what was interesting about it is that the manager, Nick, didn't run to the printer to get the part. He wanted his people to get the part. So he could allow them to feel that sense of relief, to sense of comfort and satisfaction with this part. So that is emotional safety. Is really emotional safety is to help each other regain that emotional balance when we are faced with these big, huge emotions, shame, fear, sadness, surprise. So
I
let
love
me
that
share
story.
again.
I think that it's important to state that typically with situations like this, you can go ahead and share the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Typically with situations like this, you'll find that people, it's not that they necessarily want to get into conflicts, and they want to point and blame people and they don't want to look like the bad guy, but they don't have the tools. They just don't know how to create that emotional safety, and we really say that on repeat over and over again because we learn to blame, judge, criticize, and defend instead of what we want to do, which is share, accept, validate, and reassure.
Sorry.
So that's okay. Yeah. So this is exactly what Dr. Lowe was saying. Emotional safety is that felt sense that you're able to, feel connected and you're able to help regulate yourself and have the tools to help yourself understand the situation, then be able to respond to the other person's needs. So you can share, accept, validate, and reassure. And we don't have the tools, we're unable to do that. And we get so caught in our own emotions. That's why you heard in that example, in that story, and this is so very common. A design is made with an error, and it can cause the company a lot of money. And there's the losses for the company, right? And then everyone gets so into their emotions because emotions are so overwhelming. They take over, they're so big, and we don't know how to use those tools to create that emotional safety. Not yet, because we're about to teach you. And so then it becomes very, very, very difficult to recover. And that's what creates that toxic, emotionally unsafe environment. With this process, you can really feel like you have that emotional safety, which then actually creates that psychological safety, which is what we're looking for from our team members and from our employees. So it's like there's a difference here, and it's important to identify the difference so you understand why it is that we want the emotional safety. And we are not focusing on like the behavioral or psychological safety and how to shift that. We are focusing on how to create that emotional safety because from that emotional safety comes the psychological safety automatically. So psychological safety is like I can speak up without fear of punishment. Emotional safety is I can express how I feel and be accepted, be met where I am in that moment, in that experience. So we want that foundation so that we have that security. Why does it matter? I mean, we are here pretty much to so that you can have a successful experience in the workplace. We're here so you can have connected team members. We're here so at the very bottom line, the company is significantly, much more successful because of the environment that you're creating. And it's so interesting. I know I bring up my kids a lot when I do these talks, and even on the podcast, if you listen, we have a podcast. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, it's EMC Leaders, and we have a Leader in You podcast. And I bring this up because I see it so well. Like I look at a team and a company, they're almost like, you're trying to navigate children, because that those responses, those behaviors that you see in conflicts are really we're tending to their younger, like the needs that they have on an emotional level that have not yet been met. And so I have 5 children. So, like, I see them as my team, and I can see the huge effects of how the way that they're responding and the way that they react, similar to way I see the team members. And then when they feel that emotional safety and that connection, yes, you get 75% of employees leave due to poor relationships. 75%. This is the same when it comes to your personal relationships too. We see that disconnection because they don't know how to create that safe environment. So when you have teams with high emotional connection, you see 56% better performance and 50% lower turnover. So when something like this could be so new to how you approach a situation, the bottom line of the company is that we're just seeing so much more success, more engagement, more likely for the employees to stay, to want to stay with the company for a long, long time.
And this research is from McKinsey and Company. Basically, they surveyed employees and lots of employees. I think it was like 20,000 employees. And basically, it says relationships with management drives the most satisfaction at work and within their team. So it's very important. Relationship is key for our emotional safety. So now I want to talk a little bit about the science behind emotional safety. Polina, you did a great job. I love the way that you bring the kids into the conversation because it's so true.
Yeah.
Leaders are really key attachment figures in a team. And you can say that leaders play a role like a parent. We want to go to the wiser, the person who makes decisions because it's a lifeline for us, for employees. And team members are really important. They're like siblings, they need each other to create that safety. So basically, what John Bowlby, who is the father of attachment theory, said that the longing for a felt sense of connection is our primary need, especially when we are threatened, when we have vulnerability, when we make a mistake, when we feel fear or there's change coming. And emotional isolation is inherently traumatizing for us, inherently traumatizing for us. This is wired into our nervous system. So it's not about cultural context. So this is who you are as a human being. And I want to really sense that this connection with others is our best survival strategy that we have ever come up with as species. So emotional connection really calms our nervous system and provides that balance where change becomes manageable for us. We are no longer alone with that change. So it provides access to our social support system and creates that secure base. I remember working with this board. They were going through a change, and the board member says, we want to have meetings once a month, every month. And usually board members meet like every 6 months, every quarter, but they want to have actually every 2 weeks, they said, because there was so much things happening. So they can come back to their team, they can regain the balance, and then they can go out in the world and face the danger again. So everything becomes manageable when we have that emotional connection and emotional safety. And this is exactly what neuroscience tells us. This amygdala that we have in our brain is really like a radar. It assesses the body language. It assesses the facial expression. It assesses the eye contact. It assesses the response, the words. And it's basically like, have you seen it in the car, like we used to have in the radar, assessing where the police is, so you can change, manage your speed level. But it's basically assesses the connection that you have, the emotional safety that you have. And you want to be able, and the answer to the question, are you there for me? Will you be there when I need you? Will you respond to me? That is the question that is called attachment key question, where the amygdala wants a resounding yes. If it's a resounding yes, the amygdala is relaxed. If it's a no or a maybe, then the amygdala is activated, and it's basically starts to become stressed. And what Joseph Ledoux in his book The Emotional Brain basically said that the amygdala right here, when it becomes activated, it hijacks the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex, this is where our communication is stored, decisions, logic is stored, engagement skills, empathy skills, everything is stored in this prefrontal cortex. So if the amygdala is activated, it hijacks this prefrontal cortex, and now the access to the prefrontal cortex becomes very limited to us. So that's why you find yourself difficult to communicate when you are stressed, when you feel disconnected. You find yourself lacking motivation or engagement. You don't want to be engaged when you're disconnected. You feel completely broken in terms of you know how to do your job, but you can't do your job in the moment when you feel disconnected. So this is extremely important. When we create emotional safety, what Carl Rogers says, if we are able to create that emotional safety, we start to restore that balance where we let go the amygdala and we access the prefrontal cortex. When we have access to the prefrontal cortex, we grow, we develop, we can co-regulate each other's emotions, we can navigate stress easily. So everything becomes easy for us to do when we have that emotional safety. And Salvador Minuchin, who is a system theory, who developed the system theory, basically said that in a team is like a system, like in a system environment. A family is a system. People impact each other. They impact the emotions. They impact the balance. They impact how they are with each other. So understanding the relationship between members really helps you to identify and understand the team dynamics. So when people learn how to repair the connection, pay attention to the disconnection, pay attention to the emotions that are happening in each other, they can create a more balance in their system. They can help each other step out of these negative patterns and create more positive patterns. And this study was created by Sue Johnson and James Cohn, basically talking about how the brain responds to threat. So what they did is they had the women lay down into these fMRI machines, and where they told women that they would, every time they see a red light, they would get shocked on their ankles. Okay. And so every time they saw, and they had actually a really tough relationship with their partner. So even their partner was standing next to them and holding their hand. Every time they saw the red light and they got shocked on their ankles, their brain became red. Even when they didn't get shocked on their ankles, every time they saw the red light, the brain would lit up like 4th of July. After they had these bonding conversations where they repaired the connection, they had a secure connection. They had about, I think, 12 different training sessions. They did the test again. Now, every time they saw the red light, the brain was calm. Even when they get shocked on the ankles, the women said that it was just uncomfortable. where before they said it was really painful. So here's the study. It really basically demonstrates that when we have that emotional safety and connection with people we depend on, this is attachment relationships. Yes, the study was on partners, but it actually applies the same thing for team members. When they have this safety and connection, the brain responds to threat differently. Not only it does respond to threat differently, it perceives threat differently. So this is a big deal. This is huge. So what we actually, everything what we are doing in emotional safety is we are changing the conversation, the negative patterns where you have blame, shame, uh, what is it, defensiveness,
Judgment,
judgment,
criticism.
and
Mhm.
we are turning into, Polina, you continue.
Yeah, so this is what a negative cycle looks like. And this is very, very common. And what typically happens is someone will get triggered, the raw spots will get hit. So those raw spots are those sensitivities. So if you hear someone say, like, you're so sensitive, we're actually all sensitive. And I've said this before, everyone has sensitivities, they're just different. Those emotions surface. We have automatic thoughts and protective behaviors based on our previous experiences in conflicts. And then we use those ineffective protective behaviors that in turn triggers the other person in the conflict. And this cycle continues over and over again. So oftentimes we see, like, even if people get into conflicts, and they try and everything kind of like calms down or settles, or you take space and then you try and have a conversation again, they typically go right back into this conflict, into this cycle, if they don't have a process that is able to stop this cycle and create a new cycle. And the new cycle we call the positive cycle, where instead of the trigger and the raw spots, emotions, and automatic thoughts and protective behaviors, we have what's called a trigger happens because we are not actually avoiding conflicts altogether. We are not trying to have relationships that don't have conflicts because that's impossible. Every relationship has conflicts. But what we want to do is when we do get triggered, that trigger can hit our sensitive spots, our raw spots, and then the emotions come up. But instead of having those automatic thoughts and protective behaviors, we're actually able to identify what's happening with us, share the fears that we're experiencing, identify the needs and express them to the person that we were triggered by or the conflict that we are experiencing, in that situation. And then for that other person to be able to respond to those needs. So this cycle is a positive cycle. So it's a very simple process to switch a negative cycle to a positive cycle if you use a process that actually works. It's not simple if you don't have a step-by-step guide in directing you how to have these different kind of conversations. You're really speaking a different language when you're in a negative cycle and when you're in a positive cycle. So this is why we love this form, and you guys, some of you have probably already seen it. If you came to our previous webinar, we kind of went step by step through it, and you were able to share your perspective, your experience and whatever conflict you were having. So we'll just go quickly so you can see when you have this specific process, and these go step by step. You can identify the trigger, you can share exactly what the raw spots were. You can express your emotions out loud, which decreases the intensity of the emotion by 70%. You can then also express your automatic thoughts and protective behaviors, and then you can recap the entire conversation. So, ideally, after you learn and train on how to speak this way, how to use this language, then you're able to actually completely avoid that negative cycle altogether. And this is what I see with my team is that we've done so much work around this that we don't go straight to the automatic thoughts and protective behaviors anymore. What we do is we're able to share what we've been triggered by, talk about the raw spots, the sensitivities, share the emotions out loud, which immediately de-escalates and, lowers the intensity of those experiences, and then to just ask for what those each person in the team needs. And then we can respond to each other's needs because those other people also feel like their needs have been responded to as well. So this is what the form looks like. You can also get this in a practice journal. And now we're going to move on to the capabilities to test the emotional safety. So if you don't know already, Lola developed TESSA, which is the Team Emotional Safety Assessment, which is a tool that gives you a very clear picture on whether your team, you are feeling emotionally safe, and it gives you a picture of the entire team when everyone takes the assessment to see how everyone in the team is feeling, whether they are emotionally safe or not. So Dr. Lowe is going to go over the 24 capabilities and what we show in the assessment.
So what I love about this capabilities is it proactively helps you to create and nurture that emotional safety. People become a lot more accessible to each other. They know how to respond to each other. They become more self-aware, so they pay attention to how do I regulate my emotions? What does empathy looks like? And why is it that attachment is so important? And how do we repair the conflict? So all of these capabilities were identified using all of this research for the last 50 years that have been done on attachment, on humanistic theory, on systematic system theory. So all of this research that we have done, and we created these 24 capabilities. And by creating this assessment, people start to recognize, what do I need to create that safety and connection in my team? How do I create that vulnerability strength? How do I create the resilience for it? And what do I need for relationship building and support for my team? How do I make sure that we accept each other's experiences? How do I create these safe interactions? How do we reach for each other and create that emotional balance? So everything becomes a lot simpler and easier for people to understand, including the team dynamics and culture. Do we have a shared emotional language? Can we talk about our sensitivities? Can we talk about emotions? Will you respond to me when I share that with you instead of dismissing or ignoring? Will you slow down to be able for me to have that bonding conversation? Will you be there for me? That attachment key question. Will you be there for me when I need you? And we all want to go to the resounding yes, because that's when the amygdala is relaxed and we have that emotional safety. So the assessment really allows you to assess that perceived emotional safety with your team members and with your manager. These relationships are extremely important. This is what gives you the emotional safety on your team. How do you interact with your team members? How do you interact with your boss, with your manager? So we put that together and we provide you with this report. It goes into the details, providing with your top capabilities, top 5 capabilities, then the next 6, the next 5, and then the rest of them, and gives you this representation of what are your the strongest points, and what can you do, what do you should look for in terms of the red flags. So what happens, it could be overwhelming, right, at first, but what happens is you start to recognize what people need, and you start to see a difference in yourself and in your interactions as you use these information, as you use this report. For the team report, we have this a team report where we show the lowest capabilities and then the highest capabilities. And then you can really actually see with the gap analysis, where do people need the training? In what particular areas? Do they need to know how to restructure the patterns? Do they need to know how to improve their self-awareness? And that helps you to structure the training. And what we actually find is that when people use the emotional connection process, the form regularly and intensively and committed to use it, in a regular scheduled kind of like it's a regular scheduled flight, so to speak. All of the capabilities improve and increase. So you have the distribution, the score distribution, so you can see where some people maybe feel unsafe, where people, this is a big gap. This is for 29 people that took this assessment, and you could see a big gap. And what we want to lessen that gap. We want to narrow that gap. So one of the companies that has gone through the training and integrated and implemented the EMC process into their daily interactions have seen a huge improvement in their team, 73% in their ability to communicate clearly. And what people have said is, especially leaders of this company, we feel so much more relaxed. There's like calmness in our company. There's no more chaos, no more running around, no more like those bombs going off. And it's such a pleasure to come to work when there's calmness, there's peace, there's harmony going on. And 95% they improved in their ability to resolve conflicts. Culture to me is really represented by how quickly you repair the connection after conflict. Because like Polina said, conflicts will happen. But how do you repair? Do you leave the conflict feeling not heard, not really resolved, not really connected? Or do you feel like you have been together in this conflict? You feel more connected, you feel more bonded as a team, you feel like you grow in your relationship. That is culture. That is a connected culture if you have that. So you want to be able to pay attention to the conflicts. And 58% improvement in the ability to navigate change. And this is extremely important because change happens all the time. All the time. We cannot live without change. So when people feel connected, they feel safe. They deal with change with ease and flexibility. And that is what we want. It really makes our life better. And on a personal level, Polina, you want to finish up?
I was just thinking, it's so interesting. I didn't learn this stuff until I was like 35, you know, and now y'all know how old I am. And so it was I didn't even know, and this sounds so silly, but I didn't even know what a conflict was. I even though both my parents are psychologists, that they became that later in their life. So it was news to me to learn that conflicts are first normal in relationships. And then it was even more profound to really understand that you can be able to express yourself without feeling fear or shame, without being put down, without having those effects that could feel like you're alone. You now have this experience where you feel like you're not alone. So I think that the improvements for using this kind of communication tool and this process is that you are stronger as a person. You are more resilient to stress. And you're definitely less likely to get anxious and depressed. You learn faster. And the reason why you learn faster is because your prefrontal cortex is no longer hijacked by the amygdala. So it's like, imagine if the amygdala is constantly triggered. I think I even said this in the last webinar. We sit in like the ready, set, like let's say you're going to be in a race. I just love this analogy so much because I feel like it's so relatable. Let's say you are going for a race and you're sitting at the starting line, and the ref is going to be like, ready, they're going to say ready, set, go, but they actually never say go. They just say ready, set, and you're just like sitting at the starting line, waiting for the moment to say go, but that actually never happens. So when the amygdala is triggered, that part of our brain is triggered and constantly triggered, then it hijacks the prefrontal cortex, and our brain sits in that space. And so when we use this process, we are talking to the amygdala, the part of the brain that is able to then release the hold on the prefrontal cortex. And when we release the hold, we have that cognitive ability to learn faster. We have that ability to be connected to the team. We can pay attention. We can be connected to everyone. And we're able to really focus and be engaged. We could be effective as a leader and also effective in all the relationships in your life. And you just become a healthier human being because that prefrontal cortex is open and able to function at its optimal capacity. And that's really what we want in life, right? I mean, the purpose in life is truly to be yourself. And we can't be ourselves in the environment where our amygdalas hijack the prefrontal cortex, and now we cannot actually function. So I feel like, this is real this is really like necessary. It's a necessity to not surviving but thriving. It's not just surviving. The surviving experience is to sit in that negative cycle. To thrive is to break that negative cycle and create this positive cycle. So, I mean, I don't know who wouldn't want that, you know? And when I first started learning this stuff, I just didn't know I needed it, because I was so used to that very toxic environment that I didn't realize that that was not the place to thrive. So you get all these improvements and so much more.
Yes. So, as the conclusion, we'd like to open the floor to questions. We have some time. I love that we were able to cover everything what we wanted to cover. But Polina, as you were talking about the race, you
Yeah.
said ready, set, but you never say go. It reminded me of a lecture I really listened about emotion, and emotion is so powerful. And Sue Johnson, who was my teacher, she always taught us this thing. She said that if you don't address emotion, it will be sitting and waiting for that moment to come and overwhelm you in that moment of stress. So all the programs where you learn just communication skills or negotiation skills, you can't really use them in that stressful moment because the emotion will get you, will take over, and you won't be able to access those communication skills or negotiation skills. So, emotion is really, really a big, big, huge component of learning how to create that emotional safety. So, we want you to know that yes, it's new language. Yes, it's a new way of communicating, and yes, you actually become a lot more empowered and equipped to deal with all the different difficulties at work when you know that how to create that emotional safety.
Yeah, I love that so much.
So
I
maybe do you want me to stop sharing and maybe we can see if anybody has
Yeah.
any
Yeah, yeah,
questions?
absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, I think that it's also very new, this is a new approach. This is we are just the pioneers of this kind of process and also this kind of just entire experience is so different than what people are used to. Oh, I have to bring this up because I know that this is like at the top of the headlines just this last week. And I think this this relates so much to just life in general and how effective this kind of process can be. But I happened to watch a few episodes of Love Island, and I don't know if any of you are in the chat have seen any of the shows, but everyone's talking about it. Like millions and millions of people all across the US are talking about it. So it's so interesting because the first few, pretty much you go on an island and it's almost like you go into a new job, and you're just starting to form like all these new relationships with people. And you're trying to get, yeah, this much more personal because it's like you're supposed to find love. But it's so interesting as soon as there starts to become any sort of conflict and trigger in the person, really I'm seeing how little people have the tools to express their emotions and then also respond to other people's emotional needs. And this shows up everything that we do. And my kids are like, no, moms, I like to comment during TV shows. So I'm the commentary with this process in the background. I'm like, you didn't talk about your fears, your feelings. You didn't talk about your raw emotions. Oh my God, they need to do the form. Oh my God, they need my mom's like course and training. And my kids in the background, like, no, like, come on, can we just watch it? It's drama, you know? And so this shows up in everything we do. And this, really reminded me, do people feel emotionally safe in the relationships? Do they feel emotionally safe in the environment? And the answer is most of the time it's a no. And that's why it is really important to learn this kind of process so that you can find the way and the way that works to create that safety. So, thank you guys so much. This was great.
And thank you again
Okay.
for being here. Thank you, Palina. This was
Yeah,
great.
thank you. Good job, Mom.